Welcome to the Better Together Here podcast with your hosts Devin
and Ashley,
helping you make the most of your time in New York City. Hey everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Better Together Here podcast. My name is Devin.
And my name is Ashley.
In today's episode, we are going to break down 5 common New York City tourist attractions, and we're going to give you cheaper or sometimes even free alternatives to those common and sometimes expensive tourist attractions. And we're going to let you in on one of our new favorite, you'll have to check it out, spots that has some of the best margaritas we've had in a long, long time. So let's get right into it. New York City can be a very expensive place to travel, especially when you want to go out and do a lot of the common tourist attractions, or you want to be a part of the things that are kind of famous for New York, whether it be Broadway shows or going up on top of observation decks and seeing all the buildings, all those different things. So
this also will hopefully be helpful for you guys if you want to have like a very well-rounded trip to New York City, but you don't want to pay top dollar to do each of the biggest tourist attractions. Like maybe you really care about doing the real thing for one of these. Like for example, maybe you really care about like going to a Broadway show, like save your money and go to a Broadway show and get a good ticket and do all of the other like cheaper alternatives we're providing so you can have a more well-rounded experience.
First thing we're going to talk about is observation decks. We have done an entire episode breaking down our pros and cons for all of the famous observation decks in New York City. Personally, we think the Edge is the best bang for your buck and best overall views, but most of those are going to cost at least $35 per person to go up to. So if you care about seeing the beautiful skyline and just seeing the breadth that is New York City and how massive it is, there are alternatives that are still going to give you pretty good views. The first one, and probably what I would argue is one of the best options, is to go to the public library rooftop. It's at Stavros Niarchos Foundation Library. I don't know if I pronounced that right. It's on the corner of 5th Avenue and 40th Street. It's close to the main like flagship New York Public Library location. You go into the library, you go up, I believe it's to the 7th floor. You are right in the heart of Midtown. I mean, you're at 40th Street and 5th Avenue, so there are a lot of tall buildings right around you, but you still get good views of some of the popular buildings. You are up at a pretty high level, so you're getting that experience of being outdoors and being kind of in the heart of the city and getting that alternative view of the buildings around you. So that's a great, great option. Another cheaper alternative to an observation deck is to instead take the money you'd spend on an observation deck and go to a bar with a good view. You can kind of kill 2 birds with one stone. You can get a good view. You can also have a nice drink. There's a few options that we recommend for that.
In New York City, you're probably going to spend, let's be honest, like more than you want to on a good cocktail. And so if you're already going to be paying a premium for a cocktail, you might as well be paying a premium for the cocktail if you're enjoying it with a great view. Again, you are going to be paying a little bit more if you're buying a cocktail at one of these locations that we're going to mention. However, I would argue that maybe you'll be saving money in the end because you didn't pay $35, $40 just to go up to an observation deck. The added price is built into the cocktail you're drinking rather than just paying it up front.
For sure. A few that kind of fall into this category. There's a few that get mentioned all the time online. We personally have not been to them, but there is Manhatta, which is, I believe, down in the financial district. There is Overstory, and there is Nubeluz, I believe is how you pronounce it. A couple that we have been to personally. There's one, it's kind of more of a club vibe. It's called 235th. They do have a cover charge, and so I believe on the weekends it's closer to $20 or $25. Probably on weekdays you could get in for $10 to $15. I'm sure it kind of depends on, number one, if you're a girl, you'll probably get in cheaper. Sometimes they don't charge covers for women, whereas men almost always pay covers at places like this because it is a kind of true club. But if you wanted the cheapest option possible, you could pay the cover of roughly $15 and not even buy a drink. You could just go in, experience the inside club and listen to some music, and then outside they have a kind of like patio garden area with tons of seating, tons of space, and phenomenal views of kind of the Midtown area skyline.
Oh, I was just going to ask you, like, why don't women have to pay?
Because clubs know that if more women are there, then more men will show up.
Who runs the world? Girls.
Another option is Darling on 59th Street. So this is a bar that is a part of a hotel, which generally speaking, this is a good option to think about of ways to find observation deck alternatives is to just look for hotels that have bars, because most of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are going to have rooftop bars or bars on the top floors of their hotel to attract people into the bar. Just know you're going to pay a premium for that, especially these nicer hotel bars up on, a top level. You're going to probably pay in that $20 to $30 per cocktail. So again, you're getting close to the price of an observation deck, but you're getting a drink, you're in a bar, you're having a more kind of casual, fun experience, and you have the views.
Yeah, you're paying for the more unique experience. You're not just paying for the view.
Darling in particular is on 59th Street, and the views of Central Park, absolutely phenomenal. Like unbeatable, I would say. Like better than some of even the observation deck views when it comes to Central Park specifically. So if that's what you care about, and again, think about what matters most to you about this observation deck experience. And if you just want to see like the Midtown skyline, another option is Central Park. In Central Park, you can get some amazing views of the buildings and the city itself. And you get kind of these unobstructed views because you're in the park, not surrounded by a bunch of buildings. Good places to do that. Woolman Rink, which is the ice rink, and in the summer it becomes either like pickleball or sometimes roller rink. Above that, there's kind of these rocky areas that you can climb up to and get some really, really good views of the Midtown skyline. Another couple areas in Central Park, the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir. Because it's the reservoir, there's no trees, there's nothing obstructing your views. And there's a full loop that goes around the reservoir. I think it's about a mile. I'm not 100% sure. I run around it.
That's a running boy fact. That's not a me fact.
It's at least a mile, but
Devin runs marathons. I don't know if everyone knew that, but
I do sometimes. And I run all around Central Park, and running around the reservoir or walking around the reservoir, you get really amazing views because you get views of the Upper East Side, you get views of the Upper West Side, views of Uptown, views of the downtown, Midtown skyline. I mean, it is a wonderful spot to see the buildings of New York City. Similar is the Great Lawn.
The Great Lawn has absolutely gorgeous views. Every time I'm walking around there, I have to stop and take a photo because it's so pretty. You have an amazing view, like looking downtown onto like the Midtown area where there happen to be like really pretty tall buildings. So great spot to get some skyline views just in the middle of Central Park.
So don't sleep on Central Park as an option for seeing all the buildings that New York has to offer. Okay, a couple other spots that have good rooftop views or higher views, 2 different museums. So the Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, they have a rooftop garden area. It's not always open, so you'd want to look ahead. It's more frequently open in the summer months, understandably, and in the winter it's often closed, but that is a good option. Alternatively, the Whitney Museum, which is down in the Chelsea area, I believe the outside areas there are always open, and there's multiple I think that museum's like 5-6 levels. It's not like a super wide museum. It's much taller than it is wide, and great views. I mean, you're not going to get sweeping uptown views, but you're going to get really good views of Chelsea, and you'll see Lower Manhattan, and it's still a beautiful spot to like get pictures and just kind of take in the size and scope of Manhattan.
And again, you're kind of combining activities here. Like the Whitney Museum is close to $30 a ticket to get into.
Same with the Met.
But rather than just paying for an observation deck, you're paying to get into a museum, having that experience, and getting cool views as well. So slightly cheaper if you think of it that way.
We're going to take a quick break to remind you to sign up for the Better Together Here newsletter. We email once a week with important things that you want to know about New York City, the best places to eat, the best things to see, the best ways to get around, all the things that you want to know once a week. So go to bettertogetherhere.com/newsletter and sign up today. A couple other places that we've talked about thoroughly, we have entire episodes about them. Pier 57 has a rooftop. It is next to Little Island, which also has a great view of the Chelsea and downtown area, as well as Brooklyn Bridge Park. You could walk across the Brooklyn Bridge, be in the park, and see the whole downtown financial district skyline. So all of this to say, you can go up on an observation deck, pay the price, get the best view possible, or you can do some of these cheaper and or free options and still get amazing views of New York City and the skylines. All right, second on our list, the Statue of Liberty. You can go out, you can pay for the actual ferry that's going to take you out to the Statue of Liberty. It's going to take you out to Ellis Island. It's a full day. You're looking at least 3 to 6 hours to do all of that. And it is It's an experience. It's a long day. I'll never do it again. I've done it twice. I will never, ever do it again, more than likely.
It's worth doing, like, in general. If you're here for, like, a weekend in New York City, I don't know if that's what I would choose for you in your weekend, if I'm being totally honest. But it is a fun experience if you want to do that once in your life.
Yeah.
However, a great alternative that happens to be free is you can take the Staten Island Ferry. It leaves from Battery Park, and it will take you on a big ferry boat. It will pass the Statue of Liberty. You can get great pictures of you and your friends in front of the Statue of Liberty. Takes you to Staten Island, and then you can just turn around and get right back on the other boat that's coming back into Manhattan. In doing that, you get great views of the Statue of Liberty again, and you also get amazing views of the downtown area of Manhattan, the financial district, which is really cool to see by the water. So, great alternative.
Completely free.
Completely free. Frankly, I would choose this for you versus doing the entire Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island experience.
Yeah, before we lived in New York, we actually did the Staten Island Ferry experience before we ever actually went out to the Statue of Liberty or Ellis Island, and I thought it was a great experience because like takes roughly like an hour and a half if you can time it correctly, where like you're not waiting for super long to get on, and then you get right back off in Staten Island and come back. Like it's not the longest experience, and you get amazing views. Alternatively, if you don't even want to go on the ferry and if you don't want to spend that time, you can just see the Statue of Liberty from Battery Park. There are different spots in Battery Park where you can have pretty unobstructed views. Obviously, you're not very close to it, and so you're not going to get like an up-close, crystal clear view, but you can still see the Statue of Liberty and have that experience of seeing the iconic attraction that is the Statue of Liberty. All right, and that leads us to this episode's You'll Have to Check It Out segment.
The next stop is
Super Burrito. So we teased this at the beginning of the episode. We accidentally stumbled upon this spot the other night. We had just gone to a comedy club. We had gone to the Comedy Cellar, which is, we'll talk about this in a future episode, a great, great place for comedy. And we were just wandering around that area looking for a fun bar. This place had a fun name, looked good. Super Burrito, phenomenal name. We walked in, friendly staff, a very cozy vibe. It just kind of felt like everyone who was there, it was a slightly older crowd. Some of the bars you go to in like the West Village or like the Village area can be like very, very young crowds. This felt like a little bit, it was like more like 30s plus, whereas some bars you go in and you feel like you're in a college bar or something like that.
I would say late 20s, early 30s was the age group. Because I'm 29. I felt right at home.
But there were a couple people who were like in their mid to late 30s or even their 40s. Like it was a good blend of people.
They had a great live DJ playing absolute bangers.
The best part about him, he was playing bangers that were not just like, he was playing like a ton of hip hop songs, right? And like classic pop songs, but then he also mixed in like a song by the Postal Service. Like he was just all over the like genre map, and he was doing it really well. It was phenomenal. He was good. The best part about this spot though were their margaritas. They're called Tommy's Margaritas. That's what they're called on the menu. They're $14, which for a margarita in New York City, that's pretty fair price. Absolutely great.
A great margarita. And they use like actual lime juice in it. Like when you walk in, you see the bar and there's a giant juicer.
Yeah, we watched him juice the limes after we ordered 4 margaritas.
Which makes a huge difference for me. There's nothing like a fresh margarita with fresh juice. If you're using like the premix stuff, it's usually not for me.
To clarify, we didn't get 2 margaritas each at once. We were with 2 other friends, so 4 margaritas. We didn't get any of the food. We didn't get a burrito, but we saw some people order them and they looked really, really good. And their
they
reviews are
smelled
positive.
great.
Yeah. I wish we would have gotten one, but that's Super Burrito, a very fun, cozy vibe with great drink options. And on the weekends, live DJ, definitely worth checking out. So that's Super Burrito. And now back to cheap alternatives to major tourist attractions.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
Third on our list is pedicab or horse-drawn carriage rides in Central Park alternatives. Again, we have talked about this. Pedicabs, we almost always recommend against. They often price gouge people. The horse-drawn carriages, we also don't recommend these because, number one, they're extremely expensive. And number two, we don't think horses should be in Manhattan. I think horses should be out running free on a prairie. I know that's like a little bit of wishful thinking, but truthfully, they are not in the best living conditions in Manhattan. We've seen where they stay, and it's not great. We'll just say that. If you want to go down a rabbit hole, you can just search New York City horses on Google, and you'll see plenty of things that you don't want to see.
Or just take our word for it and avoid yourself being super bummed out.
Yeah, it's a little sad. Okay, so some alternatives to this. Number one, there's a free Central Park audio guide. So if you care about the Pedicab or the horse-drawn carriage because you want the feeling of getting a tour and someone who's talking to you about all the spots, the Central Park audio guide is completely free. You can access it from your phone. You don't even have to download an app. You can just call a number and then punch in the code of whatever spot you're standing next to, and it'll give you anywhere from like a 45-second to 2 or 3 minute explanation and history of that specific spot. So there's one about Gapstow Bridge. There's one about Bow Bridge. There's one about Woolman Rink. Like they're all the Ramble. All the different pieces have little historical bits of information that you can just access on your phone through the free audio guide. And we have a full episode about this as well, which we'll link to.
Highly recommend taking some time and exploring Central Park. Has amazing views, really beautiful park to walk around, great people watching, but this is a really easy thing to do for free, and you can still learn a lot as you're doing it for free.
Additionally, a lot of people think, okay, if I want to see a lot of spots in Central Park, maybe you have an injury or you're with kids or you're with someone who's a little bit older and you don't want to walk a ton. There are a lot of spots in Central Park that you can access very easily from the subway. So you can take the subway as close as possible to these spots and then maybe only need to walk 5 minutes or less. So some of the things that would fall under that category are the Conservatory Water, which is on the Upper East Side, Strawberry Fields, which is on the Upper West Side, just accessible from Central Park South and like 60th Street on the NQRW line. You can very easily walk to the Pond, Woolman Rink, Gapstow Bridge. Also Upper West Side, or Upper East Side, you can get to the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir, which we talked about earlier. Close walk. You don't have to walk around the whole thing, but you could pop out on the subway around 86th Street, walk the less than 5 minutes or so to the reservoir, get some amazing views, and then walk back and be right by a subway or a taxi. Like there are very, very easy options to do this. Another one on that note is the Conservatory Garden on the Upper East Side. It's currently partially under construction. We're recording this in March of 2025, but some of it is still open. Beautiful, beautiful area.
Another great option for getting around Central Park on a budget is that you could rent a city bike. There are tons of city bike stations all around New York City. There's tons of city bike stations all around Central Park. So you could check out a city bike and go take a ride for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 50 minutes, whatever you want. Just be careful. Some of them are the e-bikes. The e-bikes you pay per minute. Usually if you get a regular bike, you pay it's like a flat fee, and then you pay per minute after 45 minutes. So just keep an eye on how long you're using it. But this is a great option for a quick and easy bike rental.
If you know that you want to be in Central Park for, let's say, 2 to 4 hours or, a longer period of time, but you don't want to pay the price for a pedicab or a horse-drawn carriage, there are bike rentals and or electric scooter rentals that are going to be much more affordable and are going to still give you that flexibility to not have to be rushing on a city bike if that's something you're interested in. And we will link to opportunities to do that as well in our show notes. All right, fourth on our list of common attractions and some cheaper alternatives is a Broadway show. Like Ashley mentioned, hopefully this gives you an idea of saying, I can pick and choose some things that I do want to spend more money on and others maybe find a cheaper option. Of all of them, I would probably say it's worth paying for a Broadway show. I mean, we've talked about it before. It is the top world talent. There are dozens of Broadway shows. All the best talent in the world is here. Between here and the West End in London, there's not much better place when it comes to live performing theater. So we would say go to a Broadway show if it's important to you, but there are some alternatives to have a cheaper experience and still see some really, really good live theater in New York City. Seeing a Broadway show, a great option. And before we give you real kind of cheaper alternatives, we'll give you 2 good options for finding cheaper or better tickets.
So the first option for finding cheaper tickets is a booth in the middle of Times Square. It's called the Tickets booth, TKTS. They also have a secondary location in Lincoln Center that also has slightly shorter lines depending on when you're going. This is a great option. They do day of Broadway tickets and they're usually half price. This is a great option if you want to sit down in the orchestra and you don't want to pay top dollar for a great orchestra seat. Again, these are kind of last minute tickets, and sometimes one show will sell out that you want to see, but it's usually a great alternative if you want to go to a Broadway show, but you don't want to pay $300 up front to buy a ticket for a Broadway show. The next option for just buying Broadway show tickets is a website that we really like called Today Tix. They have tickets like far in advance as well, and they usually have great discounts on their app and on their website.
Today Tix in particular, if you plan ahead, if you're looking, 3, 4, 5 months in advance, you could possibly get into popular shows for as cheap as I've seen tickets for $29 for popular Broadway shows. So plan ahead. Okay. When it comes to the real kind of cheaper alternatives, there's a few options. So there's what's called rush tickets. The way this works is every show does it differently. You usually have to sign up on their website. Essentially, if the show is that night at 7 p.m., at roughly 10 a.m. or something like that, they will release what they call rush tickets, and you have to go physically into the box office to get these tickets, and there's a limited amount available. So you just have to plan ahead on this. Similarly, many of the shows, including I know Harry Potter does this, I believe Aladdin, they do lottery tickets. You sign up, there's X amount that they offer through the lottery, and then they're sometimes as cheap as $30, $40 for premium tickets. So those are kind of two really good options if you still want to see a quote-unquote normal Broadway show, but you want to look at potential cheaper options. If you are willing to be a little bit more flexible about the type of show that you see, there's a few really good options, one of which is off-Broadway. Off-Broadway, sometimes the tickets are still a little bit more expensive, but they're generally going to be cheaper than a standard Broadway show. There are tons of options for this and some really, really good shows. We saw Little Shop of Horrors off-Broadway, and it was cheaper than what a standard Broadway ticket would have been, and it was an amazing show, and it was talent. A lot of the people who are in this off-Broadway are normally on Broadway. Sometimes they're just in between gigs, or this is what they got picked for. You still get really, really good talent often on the off-Broadway shows.
Another great option for Broadway show alternatives is going to smaller, more local theaters. They have, even beyond the typical off-Broadway theaters, they have different local community theaters. And it's New York City. There is a theater on every single block all throughout the city. So it's just a matter of doing a little bit of research and finding smaller venues that are going to have performances that are much more affordable.
And similarly, there are multiple colleges in New York City that are going to offer performances that are going to be much cheaper than a Broadway show and are still often going to have really good talent. There is Juilliard, there's Columbia, NYU, Fordham, all these different colleges. Again, if you just do some research, you can probably get in and see a good live performance without paying top dollar for a Broadway show. And that leads us into this episode's New York know-how. All right, so again, this is from the NYC Basic Tips and Etiquette book by Nathan W. Pyle. We've talked about it before. We'll link it in the show notes. This is NYC Basic Tips and Etiquette number 21. When a taxi is occupied, the light on top of the taxi is off. When a taxi is vacant, the light is on. And this is very standard. And obviously sometimes they miss it, but it is a pretty clear way to know if a taxi is available. If the little light on top, it'll usually have 3 or 4 numbers and some letters, which is their taxi number. If the light is on, you can try and hail it. If you're standing there trying to hail a taxi and you keep getting passed up, odds are that those taxis are occupied and the light is not on and you're just trying for nothing.
That's a good tip to know. And one that I didn't know until we lived here. Definitely spent a lot of time on street corners trying to get taxis that weren't available.
Feeling frustrated for no reason. So if the light is on, the taxi is vacant. All right, that's this episode's New York know-how. 5th on our list, museum alternatives. Okay, so there are so many world-class, world-famous museums in New York City that, frankly, I think it's worth the cost of admission. But if you don't want to pay for something like the Met or the MoMA or the Museum of Natural History or the Guggenheim or whatever it may be, there are kind of really 2 options that you have. Number 1 is to make friends with a local who will get you in via pay-as-you-wish. So a lot of the main museums in New York, including the Met, including the Museum of Natural History, they have pay-as-you-wish if you are a local resident of New York, and I believe sometimes New Jersey and Connecticut. I think those fall in as well. you have to show ID to get that. So you can't just say, I'm from New York, and then they're going to give you a ticket. Like, they're going to make you show ID with your address in a local area. So if you can make friends with some local, you make a friend at a bar and say, hey, let's go to a museum together tomorrow. I don't know. That's an option.
Or frankly, just walk around the Met and just be brave and be like, hey, do you live in New York City? Can you help me get a pay-as-you-wish ticket?
Yeah. Some people might go for it. Others, maybe not. But
worth a try.
Yeah, if you're looking to save money, sometimes you got to try things like that. Okay, another option, though, this is like a more like actual alternative. There are so many art galleries in New York City, all over Manhattan, all over Brooklyn, Queens, like any borough, there's going to be art galleries. There are also a lot of free museums. You just have to do your research and find those, but there are a lot of art galleries, especially in Chelsea. And again, this is New York City. Some of the best artists in the world, some people who are really, really talented are having their art in art galleries. So do some research, find some art galleries. There's an app called Seesaw, like the thing you played on as a kid, SEESAW, and it lists active galleries in New York City. So check that out. All right, we're also going to give you a bonus idea on top of these 5. New York City is home to many, many sports teams. There's the Knicks and the Nets. There's the Yankees and the Mets. There are the Giants and the Jets. Wow, those all rhymed, and I did not plan on doing that, but it did. Most of these,
and there's the Rangers.
And there's the Rangers. I didn't include them because they don't rhyme. Well, there's the Rangers and the Devils and the Islanders. I mean, there are so many sports teams in New York City and greater New York City area. They're not cheap, especially the Knicks and the Rangers. Getting into MSG is not cheap. Things like the Yankees and the Mets, because baseball has so many games, you can often get in for actually pretty fair prices, especially on a weekday. I think I got into a Yankees game once for like $4. That was after like fees and stuff too. I don't know how that happened, but it did, and it was amazing. An alternative to going and paying and being at these pro sports events is to go to a bar near the stadium. Obviously, you're not in there, you're not seeing it live, but there are some phenomenal supporters bars like for the Knicks or for the Rangers or for the Yankees right around the stadiums. This is especially true for MSG and for Yankee Stadium. There are some really, really fun bars that you go to, an hour before the game starts, and they're going to be packed and filled to the brim, and then a lot of people will leave to be going to the actual game, and you can hang out, and there'll be other fans there still watching remotely via the bar. And it's a really fun experience. Like it's a good time. It's not quite like being there live, but it's a really fun time.
Yeah, I highly recommend this idea if you want to like have the experience of going and watching New York sporting events, but you don't want to pay $200 a ticket to go and see the Knicks, which maybe that should be the thing that's your priority. Maybe it is. Maybe you do want to go to the Knicks game and you want to do the cheaper alternative for all of our other ideas. Again, if you want to go to a place in person, go to a place in person. Like, save up the money, spend the money, go to a Knicks game in person. Highly recommend that experience specifically. I happen to be a Knicks fan and have turned into a huge Knicks fan because of my experiences going to MSG and watching the Knicks and being in that environment. Like, people are watching and cheering for every point. And for me, that's a new experience. I'm a newer sports fan in my life. I didn't grow up watching a lot of sports. So kind of going into this is in my adulthood, New York is a really fun place to be, learning about sports and becoming a sports fan. Alternatively, if you don't want to go and cheer on the New York teams and you're visiting New York City, there is a supporters bar for pretty much every single team in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, it's not just American sports teams, because certainly there are like supporters teams for every NFL team and for most of the MLB teams, and a lot of the colleges even have supporters bars, but there are also supporters bars for most of the Premier League, the soccer league in England. There are supporters bars for like Barcelona and PSG, and like there are a lot of bars. A lot of the Irish pubs will play rugby league games that are on. I mean, there are so many options when it comes to sports supporters bars in New York City.
So if you want to have some type of sporting experience in New York City and you happen to be a huge football fan and your team isn't playing here this weekend, like, go to the bar of that supporters group and watch a Jaguars game in the middle of New York City.
With a bunch of other Jaguars fans. Yeah. And you'll probably meet people from, if you're from Jacksonville, you'll probably meet people from there, and you'll start chatting with people and have great conversations and great experiences. I mean, we've been to probably dozens of sports supporters bars, and just you kind of become a fan of that team for those few hours, and it's such a fun experience. Like, can't recommend it enough.
Devin also has a whole article on our website about different teams and supporters bars to check out.
Yeah, I think I have every NFL team and most of the NBA teams, and still working on some of the other sports. Oh, and all the Premier League teams. So go check that out. It's on our website, bettertogetherhere.com, and just search sports supporters or supporters bar or something like that, and it'll show up. We rifled through a lot of different options for you to have a cheaper experience in New York City. Again, a lot of these may not be completely free, but they're going to save you some money. Find out which of these categories is most important to you and, pay the top dollar for that experience. But for the other ones, use these to get some alternatives or to kill two birds with one stone, like go to a museum with a view like the Met, go to the rooftop and kind of get both things at once. If you have not already, we highly recommend signing up for our newsletter. We email once a week. In those emails, we talk about episodes and articles like this about getting around New York and kind of doing more touristy things in New York. But we also talk about current events happening in New York and specific exhibitions or festivals or things like that that are only happening that specific week. We also talk about some New York history. We recommend different places to go. I mean, it's a good newsletter. I'm biased. I write it. I think it's really good. I think you should sign up for it. bettertogetherhere.com/newsletter. Please like, review, subscribe, all the different things, engaging with our podcast in whatever podcast platform you're using, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever. By engaging with it, by liking it, leaving ratings, it really helps it show up in the algorithms, and that is super meaningful to us. And other than that, we'll catch you on the next episode.
This is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train. Thank you for riding with